my name is Hannah. Welcome back to my channel, Savage Reads. I have some great books that I'm so excited to talk about today. But first, I just wanted to mention that I am getting close to that magical 1,000 subscribers. And I really appreciate everyone who has supported my channel and has come over to watch a video or leave a comment. I really appreciate it. And when I get to 1,000 subscribers, I would love to do a little video recapping my time on BookTube and answer any questions that you leave. So if you have any questions that you would like me to answer in a 1,000 subscriber video, let me know in the comments down below. But let's just jump into the books that I have read the last week. This first book I heard about from Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot, and I've heard other people read this as well. It is Weyward by Amelia Hart. Now, this book is following a few different timelines. We have Kate, who is our modern day timeline, who is fleeing an abusive relationship. We have our timeline back in the 1600s with Alpha, who is being tried for witchcraft. And we have our timeline that is in 1942 with Violet, who is feeling constrained by the societal conventions that she is constrained by. And we have these three timelines and how they weave together all of these women related through history. And I think maybe based on the cover, I was looking at it with the bird on the cover, and I thought maybe there would be a little bit of a creepier, more horror-y element, and I didn't really feel like that was it. It was more of a magical fantasy, maybe elements of magical realism kind of story of women and their power as it goes through the generations, but also ultimately was a little bit forgettable for me. I don't think there was anything in it that I thought, wow, that's gonna stick with me forever, but I enjoyed it, and I thought that the story was good. I liked how it wove together the narratives of these three women and how they grew and found their own power, and so I liked it. I had a good time. Caitlin at Bandy's Books recommended the book The September House by Carissa Orlando. This book follows Margaret in her beautiful Victorian house, and her house is haunted. There are lots of ghosts that are living in this house with her, but she has a very practical attitude. This house is beautiful. It has real hardwood floors. She's not gonna leave. Yes, there's a lot of ghosts, but you get used to anything after a while. If birds are flying into the window to commit suicide, take away the bird feeders. There's always a rule that you can do to make the house more livable. But the problem that we have with the house is that things get worse every September. The walls start to bleed. Whoever's living in the basement seems to become agitated. And it is just not a great time. But Margaret has it down. You make it through September, you just keep up with the hauntings through September, and things go back to a normal level of paranormal the rest of the year. But this September, things are a little different. Her husband left the month before because he could not handle another September in the house. And her daughter's been calling, a little concerned that she hasn't heard from her dad. And Margaret's daughter isn't going to listen to any of the excuses that Margaret comes up with and is coming out to visit the house for the first time. But it's September and the house is going to have its problems, so Margaret has to figure out how to hide the truth behind the house from her daughter so her daughter isn't worried about her. So from the first chapter of this book, I was delighted. I thought that Margaret's voice was so fun and so cute. Her ability to just get in and make things work. But I do think the book ended up with a little bit more depth and some interesting ideas, because what kind of person just puts up with all these ghosts and these horrible things all the time? Who can do that? And we explore that a little bit and her relationship with her daughter, and I loved it. It had some of those gory and gross horror movie type scenes, which makes me very glad I read it and didn't watch it in a movie. If it was in a movie, I wouldn't want to watch it. But reading about it, I was fine. So from the first chapter and the tone and the voice, I knew I was going to like the book. But going throughout, I didn't realize just how much. And this ended up being just a 5-star read for a thriller horror book. This one was just so good. So if a little bit of language and gore don't bother you, I think you would really like this book. Now, Scott at Gunpowder Fiction and Plot also recommended the book Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason. This book goes through the life of Martha, and she has something wrong with her, but she never really knows what it is. And even later on, when she finds out what it is never specifically mentioned in the book. It's just, this X illness is what she has. And it goes through her life and her marriage and her relationships. And for the first half or so of the book, I was bored. Really, my thought process was, oh, a mentally unstable woman who nothing really happens to her in life. I'm already living that. I don't need to read it in a book. Just kind of like, I knew that there were things and elements that were relatable, but I also just wasn't super engaged. And then it got to the end, and I don't think I've ever had this happen before, where something about the ending made all the prior stuff work for me, and I was okay with it. It went from being I'm not sure about this book, I don't know, to a 5-star read. I'm so glad I finished it because it was meaningful and heartfelt, and there were just some things that just still are ringing in my head from it. And usually when I read a book that the beginning maybe isn't so strong or whatever and the end is better, I'll say, okay, yeah, like 4 stars, I wish it had been good all the way through. No, this one needed to be the way it was all the way through this book. I think that the effort you put towards the beginning made the ending worth it. I think this is a 5-star book. You have to go through the whole thing though. There was a quote from this book that just has gone through my head so many times since picking it up. And it is, I have been unbearable, but I have never been unloved. I have felt alone, but I have never been alone. And I've been forgiven for the unforgivable things that I've done. And just that going through my head all the time. I've been unbearable, but I've never been unloved. And I thought this book was really profound and really meaningful. I loved it. I just adored this book. And I cannot believe that it changed my mind the last half of the book when the first half I wasn't too sure about. But now I'm like, I want to go back and read it, including the beginning part. It all needed to happen that way to make the ending work. Fantastic book. Gave me so much hope, so many things to think about, so many chances for introspection. I think it was very relatable, and I liked that the author never named the specific illness that Martha had because it just doesn't matter. Everyone deals with some of the things that Martha goes through, and everyone can find something that is relatable in their situation. I thought this was a beautiful book about relationships, mental health, and just being a person. And finally, another book recommendation from Caitlin at Bandy's Books. I read Cobalt Red, How the Blood of the Congo Powers Our Lives by Siddharth Kara. This is an investigative journalistic piece. We have the author going into the Congo to understand what cobalt mining conditions are and what we need to do about it. And oh my goodness, it's very eye-opening. A few years ago, I read the book King Leopold's Ghost, and it talks about the absolute horrors committed in the Congo for the harvesting of rubber, and it is just so devastating to see that it continues on today and that we are all complicit. And we are all complicit because the cobalt that is mined is used to make our smartphones and batteries. People are being exploited, killed. Children are basically being enslaved to harvest this cobalt for our electronics. And you may think, okay, well, it's mostly Chinese companies that are doing this or whatever. We're all complicit because we all have this. So what do we do? How do we make these changes to make sure that these atrocities and these things do not continue to happen. At first, I thought that the book maybe had its whole thesis right at the beginning and maybe felt a little repetitive, but then I realized that the author was doing a great job at step-by-step showing us the supply chain of the cobalt and how there is corruption at all these different levels, and talking about his own experiences, seeing the mines, talking to the children and the people who have been exploited and poisoned and enslaved and whatever else. So this was really difficult to read and to get through, but it's important to understand that this is going on and find ways that we can push for a change, because the exploitation of the Congo is not something that should be continuing. I appreciated that the author gave some of the historical background into these mines and into the country. And I was glad that he pointed out that even though these tech companies will say, we made sure that there was no child labor involved with the production of our devices, the reality is that the way that cobalt is mined currently, there is no way to be sure that the cobalt that you are getting is free from child labor. It was a really good book, really important, really rough. Do recommend it. Definitely should read to understand what is going on. And that is what I have read the last week or so. If you have read any of these books, let me know in the comments down below. And if you have any questions that I should save for my 1,000 subscriber video, let me know as well. And I will see you all on the next one. Thanks.